Chapter 3 Upgrades Lecture 3 Old Earth Former Mainland Terra. It was a glorious year for Terra and its people that day of Earth, year 2145, deep within the confines of Talon HQ, located near the center of their cozy little island. Many forts stretched across its landscape, but this was the most prominent and secured. While it did house medical facilities, this was not an approved section. Secluded in secrecy and shut from prying eyes as a single doorway, mechanical turrets support its boundaries, allowing not even guards access. Yet a female doctor enters the room while Azuriel sits on the table. With the door clanking shut behind her, she gives him a slight smirk.
Are you ready, Mr. Cathal?
He looks up at her with a bit of nervousness.
I believe so, but I still don't exactly know what we're doing.
The doctor introduces herself.
Well, I'm Dr. Arenthal, and this machine is the Sayar RMD.
She points up to the machine with a faint smile. Azuriel blinks at her a few times and tries to repeat it.
CORMD? What's that supposed to mean?
Dr. Arenthal motions for him to lie down and begins strapping him down.
Standard internal operation replacement medical device. It's what will make this so easy.
She smiles at him as she tightens the straps. He blinks a few more times at her.
What exactly is so easy?
She flips a switch on the wall, and the machine begins to wake as she walks back to him. The machine starts to whir and warm up as a variety of arms loaded with different medical tools appear from the machine. The whir eventually tones down to a vibrating hum and beeps twice.
The transplant, of course.
His eyebrows shoot up as he quickly turns his face to her.
Transplant? Transplant of what? I'm perfectly healthy.
Her smile dies with a sigh.
Your arms, silly. They won't be able to support the demand of the suit.
Azuriel tries to tug at the straps a little.
What suit? The Talon armor is perfectly maneuverable.
She blinks at him as she realizes her mistake.
Oh? They didn't tell you?
He stares at her before asking.
Tell me what?
She looks off into the distance with a tilt to her head.
The Mach II armor requires a more
She pauses for a moment and then places a hand on his arm.
ruggedly built figure.
Azuriel's brow furrows as he looks down at himself.
I'm 125 kilos of pure beef. What more can this thing demand?
Dr. Arenthal looks back at him and begins disclosing the specifications.
The Mach II stands at 2 3/4 meters and requires an operator to be at least 2.5 meters.
She softly rubs down his arm and calmly continues.
We could just make you taller, but then you would not match the scale of the suit.
Curiously, Azuriel watches as she rubs his arm.
And what exactly is this machine going to do about that?
With a faint smile, Arenthal sighs.
We have to reconstruct your body from scratch. Each major body part, arms, legs, then pelvis, abdomen, and torso. Then
She looks him in the eyes.
the head. Every part of you will still be you, just remade. Bigger, better, stronger. And we're even going to implement circuitry augmentation as well as alloy the bone.
Azuriel's eyes madly stare her down.
How exactly do you do this?
Pointing up to the machine, she gives a half smirk.
Well, that's going to be making all the major cuts, and while that's happening, your DNA will be analyzed. The result of the analysis will be used for the development of a new arm, which will attach once we snip off the old one.
Jokingly, she scissors her fingers.
Wait, you're going to cut off my arm and then make the new one?
His eyes widen. Arenthal hits his chest softly.
Yeah, we're going to need that arm to scale to the new one correctly. We don't want to just make one that doesn't fit.
Azuriel lies there, his mouth half open as he takes this in.
You mean the arm that's going to be developed for a 2.5 meter man? That one? You want to make sure that will fit on me?
His mouth closes with sarcasm. Her eyes drop back at him in response.
As I said, your whole body's going to be upgraded. If we started with no model for each body part, you'd end up looking like a Frankenstein's monster.
She pats his face.
Oh, don't worry. I'll make sure you're still pretty.
Azuriel cannot help but shockingly blink as she pats him, realizing he cannot move. She says,
So, then, let's go ahead and start.
I still don't understand why I need to be cut up for this. Can't they make the suit smaller?
Dr. Arenthal pulls out a small screen from under the table, and it lights up.
They already made the armor, and I'm sure it cost quite a bit.
He presses a button. An arm of the machine is lowered and injects Azuriel with a numbing agent. He softly pants as the needle enters his arm in several places.
I believe this is more cost effective than making a new suit.
I'm going to be asleep for this, right?
Azuriel looks from his arm to her with worry in his eyes. She sucks her teeth for a moment in response as she thinks of a way to tell him no.
See, the thing is, your body will not recognize a new body part as your own, even though it matches your DNA.
She twirls her finger around the screen, stalling before she continues.
You need to be awake so we can mentally force your body to accept this part.
Azuriel lets out a little whimper.
That doesn't even make sense.
Calmly, Dr. Arenthal smiles and pats his face again.
The best we can do is numb the pain. I have this rubber ball if you want to hold it in your mouth.
Taking a common rubber ball from her lab coat pocket, she holds it out to him.
I'd suggest the ball. We'll be giving you a new face with new teeth later, but that's not for a while.
She places the ball into his quivering mouth, and he bites down hard. With the simple press of another button, another arm is lowered. A large scalpel at the end of the arm aligns with a section of his arm.
Before we begin, I should tell you that we aren't simply lopping off your arms and reattaching them. We have to cut every ligament, every muscle, every attached piece of tissue to maintain mobility.
The scalpel touches his skin. It would not cut without her command.
I will be here the whole time, making the cuts with the machine. I will also be attaching the new arm by hand. So you're not alone during this operation.
Azuriel looks at her, showing thanks as well as fear. His eyes stay wide. His smile is crooked behind the ball, and his brow is furrowed. Before starting the operation, she tells him one last thing.
It will hurt.
Azuriel lies there and stares at the machine, quietly thinking to himself about what he is about to experience. With an audible click, the machine begins. The blade slices deep around his left shoulder. Although he is pumped full of painkillers, Azuriel still feels the thickness of the blade. All he can do is clench his teeth. He had been stabbed in training plenty of times. The cold metal of steel entering his body is nothing new. But this is something different. Perhaps because he knows exactly what is going to happen. The arm of the machine makes a perfect circular cut around his shoulder in an instant, lacerating to the bone. A second machine arm drops and grips the uncut flesh, pulling it back, exposing the bone. Using a much smaller, finer blade, a third arm reaches in between the separated parts to cut ligaments. After several lacerations, the third arm works its way through his chest, cutting apart his right pectoral muscle from the inside. Tears stream across his face as he cracks the rubber ball between his teeth, and his eyes rolls as the entire arm is torn apart. A final arm lowers itself and suctions itself to the bone. As it begins to apply pressure, his eyes widen and his mouth opens, dropping the ball. A stiff tug pulls through cut flesh, and his arm is separated from his body. An audible pop echoes throughout the room, signifying its removal. Blood jets across the room, smacking Dr. Arenthal across the face. Without a flinch, she keeps her focus on the arm. However, the machine has missed several attachment points. Arenthal rushes over to his arm and works quickly to remove trapped tendons and ligaments. Unable to move, Azuriel slips in and out of consciousness. This is a race she had prepared for, but not a welcome one. Without the proper clamps and cuts, the removal of his arm is more akin to having it torn off by an animal rather than surgically removed.
The machine is not perfect, Az. Stay with me.
She wraps his chest in gauze and replaces the drained blood bags. As Arenthal finishes, she notices Azuriel is fighting to stay awake through the pain.
Don't worry, Az. One arm down. You're going to get a better rest time while the machine starts forming your new one.
Upon hearing this, he lets out a faint giggle, knowing full well she still has to stop the bleeding. The machine deposits his severed arm on a table off to the side as she works frantically to fill the gaping hole with gauze and continue the cycle of blood through his body. Azuriel catches his breath with a gasp, fully waking up to the pain. His screams echo through the room, forcing his doctor aside. Grasping for her radio, she alerts her authority.
I need help! Now!
Azuriel's heart rate accelerates as he hears this through his screaming, and this only causes more blood to flow out. Full-on panic engulfs him as shock takes its footing. Arenthal grabs the quickly sewed gauze and replaces it, realizing she is running low on supplies and needs a solution. She lets out a quick sigh as two more doctors rush in with kits of their own. They seal the door behind them and begin injecting Azuriel with nullifiers and morphine. As he looks over his chest and missing arm, Azuriel lets out a soft whimper. He tries to catch his breath for a moment.
Oh, God.
The words seep out of his mouth along with a trickle of tears. Appalled by the sight, he jerks his head away, trying to take his mind off the pain. One doctor takes notice and helps by holding his head away from the view. Softly cooing at him, Dr. Arenthal strokes his hair.
We've got you. Don't worry.
She coos as she replaces more gauze.
As I said, this arm is done. It will be several hours before the new one is made.
He looks over at her, confusion seeming to be met with more questions.
What do you mean this arm? You're not planning on both arms today, are you?
Dr. Arenthal looks at him quickly and sarcastically reminds him.
Well, yeah. We need to get the complete muscle structure redone for any given section.
His panting speeds up slightly.
What? I feel like I'm
He takes a few moments to focus his consciousness.
barely making it through this one.
Still trying to control the flow of blood, she tries a different approach.
Well, don't focus on that. Think about this. You know the pain already. You're ready.
He lets out a scoffing sigh.
And the second is not always as bad as the first.
She says. His eyes close for a few moments, and Arenthal begins to worry.
As? You're still awake, right?
He softly nods to her as he keeps his sight away from his missing arm. After a little bit of time, one of the doctors takes his leave, allowing Arenthal more room and assistance if she needs it for the next part. Azuriel tries his hardest to focus on other things. Dogs, kittens, birds, anything besides their conversation. He is constantly reminded that it is not over as the two doctors quietly discuss the next operation. Soon the machine above dings and the fifth mechanical arm is lowered, wielding a large human arm and pectoral segment, each dangling with its own set of ligaments, stimulated and packed with coursing blood, and ready to attach. With the bone itself having been remastered into terranium counterparts, the new material made the arm too heavy to be manually fitted back to his body. However, Arenthal still must line the socket and bone up perfectly. With her co-worker's assistance, she makes quick work of attaching the new arm. After every ligament, every tendon, every nerve, every muscle fiber is connected, she wipes her forehead and begins suturing the skin together. The pain is still obviously affecting Azuriel as he continues to watch the less horrifying version of the transplant. He occasionally lets out a little moan, as if to let her know he is still in pain. Using a laser skin grafter, she melts the two pieces of skin together and heals them at the same time.
Now, I'll tell you that after you regain normal feelings, your body may feel different.
She glances at him to see his reaction, letting out an obvious scoff.
You mean, besides, my arm being torn off and a new one attached?
He blankly stares at her as a fit of sarcastic anger pools inside him. Arenthal rolls her eyes at him.
Yes, calm down.
She waits for him to act a bit more resolved before continuing.
I was referring to your skin in general.
His ears turn in quickly as she continues.
This is not normal skin. It is impact resistant.
He cocks his head more with each passing word.
And puncture proof and slash resistant.
She looks back at him.
It may feel thick.
Azuriel refrains himself from asking any more. However, Arenthal continues.
It is a little difficult to work it together by normal means. Hopefully we will be finished by the end of this year.
This year?
He snipes at her, nearly jumping from his bed and ruining the soldering.
What the hell do you mean this year? It's February.
She holds a hand up to quiet him.
And you think a complete body transplant would take how long?
Upon hearing those words, he quickly shuts up.
We're already doing things that no one else is capable of, Azuriel.
She pauses and looks him over.
You realize through your pain and anger while you're here, right? To become the first?
He nods his head softly and catches himself. She continues.
The process might take a year, yes. That is because, once again, we have to do this several times at every inch of your body.
Azuriel catches a bit of snideness as he looks away from her.
This involves recovery periods in which you will do nothing but lie on your arse all day, serving our proud country.
He snaps back to her with that last bit.
Excuse me?
He questioned her.
I meant that literally. The quicker each part of your body heals and works, the better.
She playfully pats his face once more.
You can be mad at me all you want, but from now on I am your doctor. Your health is my top concern, and you will rest.
He lays his head back down and, using his brand new fully functioning arm, hand, and fingers, gives her the bird.